My name is Eleanor, and if you're listening to this, I imagine you're curled up somewhere quiet, maybe with a cup of tea in hand, seeking a story that reminds you of the hidden threads that weave through our lives. I've lived a simple existence, one that's taught me more about the human heart than any book ever could. But before I dive into the tale that changed everything for me, let me pause for a moment. Where are you listening from right now? Drop a comment below. It always warms my heart to know we're connected across the miles. I was a humble widow, you see, left alone after my dear husband Thomas passed away far too young from a sudden illness. We never had much, a small cottage on the outskirts of a bustling town, a garden that bloomed with wildflowers in spring, and enough love to fill the empty spaces money couldn't touch. Thomas worked as a carpenter, his hands calloused from years of shaping wood into something beautiful. When he died, I took in sewing and mending to make ends meet, stitching hems and patching dreams for folks who could afford better but chose me for my steady needle. My in-laws, though? Oh, they were a different breed altogether. Thomas's brother, Reginald, had married into wealth. His wife, Lavinia, came from old money, the kind that whispered of estates and inheritances. They lived in a grand house on the hill with manicured lawns and servants who bowed at the door. Reginald had built a successful business importing fine silks and spices, and Lavinia never let anyone forget it. To them, I was a relic of Thomas's poor choices, a woman who dragged their family name down with my threadbare dresses and quiet ways. They looked down upon me like I was a stain on their polished silver. Invitations to family gatherings came with pitying glances, and conversations often veered into subtle jabs about my unfortunate circumstances. It wasn't just words. It was the way they'd exclude me from decisions, the side eyes when I'd arrive at holidays with a homemade pie instead of something store-bought and extravagant. Their children, my nieces and nephews, had picked up the habit too. Little Amelia would wrinkle her nose at my gifts, simple knitted scarves, while boasting about her latest dolls from Paris. I bore it all with a smile, for Thomas's sake. He always said family was the root that kept us grounded, even if the branches grew twisted. The rain had been relentless that autumn, turning the dirt roads into muddy rivers and chilling the air with a dampness that seeped into your bones. It was the day before Reginald's annual harvest banquet, a lavish affair where the town's elite gathered to toast their fortunes. I was walking home from the market, my basket heavy with a few meager apples and a loaf of bread, when I saw him. A stranger, huddled under a leaky awning, his coat soaked through, shivering like a leaf in the wind. He was an older man, perhaps in his 60s, with a kind face etched by lines of hardship, his eyes weary but sharp. His suitcase lay beside him, battered and worn, as if it had traveled farther than any man should. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out softly as I passed. "Might you know of a place to rest? The inn's full, and this storm's got me turned around." I hesitated. The wind howled, whipping rain against my shawl, but something in his voice tugged at me. Thomas would have helped. He always said a small act of kindness could light the darkest path. "Come with me," I replied, my voice steady despite the chill. "My home isn't far. It's humble, but dry." He thanked me profusely, introducing himself as Mr. Harlan Whitaker. We trudged through the mud, the sky darkening like a bruise overhead. At my cottage, I stoked the fire, brewed tea from my last leaves, and offered him dry clothes from Thomas's old trunk, a shirt that still carried a faint scent of sawdust. He ate the simple stew I prepared, his gratitude warming the room more than the flames. As we talked by the hearth, the storm raging outside, He shared bits of his story. He was a traveler, he said, in town on business, but the details were vague, something about investments and old connections. I didn't pry. People carry their burdens privately. In return, I spoke of Thomas, of our quiet life, and even touched on the banquet tomorrow, how I'd be attending despite the cold shoulders. Family, I sighed. They test us, but we endure. He listened intently, his eyes reflecting the firelight. And when the rain eased, he insisted on leaving for whatever lodgings he could find. "You've saved me tonight, Eleanor," he said at the door, pressing a small coin in my hand. "Not much, but enough for a week's bread. Kindness like yours is rare. May it return to you tenfold." I waved him off into the night, the coin warm in my palm, and thought little more of it. Little did I know that stranger would unravel the tapestry of my world. The next evening arrived with a crispness in the air, the storm's remnants leaving puddles that mirrored the stars. Reginald's mansion glowed like a beacon on the hill, carriages lining the drive as guests in silks and jewels ascended the steps. I arrived on foot, my best dress mended but faded, carrying a basket of preserves I'd made from summer berries. Lavinia greeted me at the door with her usual saccharine smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes. "Eleanor, how quaint to see you. Do come in. Try not to track mud." Inside, the ballroom was a whirlwind of opulence, crystal chandeliers casting rainbows on gilded walls, tables groaning under platters of roasted meats, exotic fruits, and wines that cost more than my monthly earnings. Laughter echoed, but it felt hollow, like echoes in an empty church. Reginald clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture more patronizing than warm, and muttered, "Good of you to make it, sister. Perhaps mingle. Who knows? You might find a benefactor." The evening wore on, and I found myself in the shadows, nursing a glass of punch while watching the dances swirl. My in-laws' friends whispered about me. I caught snippets. "The poor widow. Such a burden. Why do they invite her?" It stung, but I held my head high, remembering Thomas's words, "Humility is armor against the proud." Before we continue with what happened next, let me take a breath here. Stories like this build slowly, don't they? The tension simmers before it boils. If you're enjoying this so far, hit that like button. It means the world to a storyteller like me. As the night deepened, the guests gathered for toasts. Reginald stood at the head of the table, glass raised, boasting of his latest venture, a partnership with a mysterious investor who'd promised to elevate their business to new heights. "This man," he proclaimed, "is a titan of industry, with connections from London to New York. He's chosen us because he sees potential. True wealth recognizes its own." Lavinia chimed in, her voice dripping with superiority. "And indeed, speaking of true wealth," she turned her gaze to me, a sly smile curling her lips. The room quieted, sensing the shift. "Eleanor, dear, you've been so quiet. Tell us, how fares your little sewing enterprise? Perhaps we could all chip in for a new needle? Charity begins at home, after all." Laughter rippled through the crowd, sharp as knives. My cheeks burned, but I forced a smile. "I'm managing, Lavinia. Kindness sustains me more than coins." "Oh, how poetic," she retorted, emboldened. "But really, Eleanor, it's embarrassing. Thomas would be mortified to see you scraping by. Maybe it's time we discussed arrangements. A small allowance in exchange for, say, not attending these events. We wouldn't want to tarnish the family image." The humiliation hung in the air like smoke. Reginald nodded approvingly, and the guests averted their eyes, some chuckling under their breath. I opened my mouth to respond, my heart pounding, when the doors to the ballroom swung open with a dramatic creak. a hush fell over the room as a figure entered, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that screamed quiet power. It was Mr. Whitaker, but transformed, no longer the drenched traveler, but a man of authority, his presence commanding the space. Servants bowed as he passed, and whispers erupted. Is that Harlan Whitaker? The Harlan Whitaker? He strode to the center, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. A warm smile broke across his face. "Eleanor," he said, his voice carrying like thunder in the silence. "There you are." Reginald's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Lavinia's face drained of color. "Mr. Whitaker," Reginald stammered, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. What an honor." Whitaker ignored him, turning instead to the assembled guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must share a story before we proceed with business." His tone was calm, reflective, much like my own now, as I recount this. "Last night, in the midst of a brutal storm, I found myself stranded, cold, and alone. Inns turned me away, carriages splashed past without a glance. But this woman, Eleanor, opened her home to a stranger. She shared her fire, her food, her stories. No questions, no expectations, just pure, selfless kindness." The room was pin-drop silent now, the earlier laughter replaced by wide-eyed shock. Whitaker continued, his voice building with emotion. "I am Harlan Whitaker, founder of Whitaker Enterprises, the very investor your host speaks of. My fortune spans continents, but last night taught me that true wealth isn't in gold, it's in the heart. Eleanor, your act flipped the scales for me. I came here tonight not just for business, but to honor you." He reached into his coat, producing a document. "Reginald, Lavinia, your partnership? It's contingent on one thing, treating this woman with the respect she deserves. But seeing how you've mocked her humility, perhaps I should reconsider." Gasps echoed. Lavinia clutched her pearls, her face a mask of horror. We didn't know," she whispered, but it was too late. Reginald blustered. "This is a misunderstanding. Eleanor is family." Whitaker shook his head. "Family doesn't humiliate. They uplift." Then, turning to me, he said softly, "Eleanor, I've arranged for a trust in your name, enough to secure your future, and more. But beyond that, I offer partnership in my ventures, if you'll have it. Your wisdom is worth more than any boardroom." Tears welled in my eyes as the guests erupted in applause, the tide turning in an instant. My in-laws stood exposed, their arrogance laid bare like wilted flowers in the sun. Lavinia mumbled apologies, her voice trembling, while Reginald hung his head, the mighty brought low. In the days that followed, the town buzzed with the tale. My cottage bloomed anew, not with wealth's trappings, but with genuine visitors, friends drawn by the story. Whitaker became a dear ally, our business thriving on principles of kindness. My in-laws? They faded into quiet reflection, their invitations now laced with humility. Lavinia even came to me one rainy afternoon, eyes downcast, seeking forgiveness. "We were blind," she admitted. "Teach us, Eleanor." And so I did. Life's great reversal had shown them, and me, that humility isn't weakness, it's the foundation of strength. Kindness isn't a debt, it's an investment that returns when least expected. True wealth, it's measured in the lives we touch, not the coins we hoard. As I sit here now, years later, Watching the same wildflowers bloom in my garden, I reflect on that stormy night. It wasn't fate or luck. It was a choice to help, to endure, to believe in the good hidden beneath the surface. Thank you for taking the time to hear my story. It's more than words. It's a reminder that in this vast world, a single act can rewrite destinies. If this touched you, share your own tale of kindness in the comments. Who knows, it might inspire the next reversal. And remember, dear listener, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Until next time, stay humble, stay true.